All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with episode 27 of Zed Daily, and I have the king of Zed Run with us, Kevin from Arbitrage Racing. How you doing?
What's up, Jake? How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. So I wanted to start it off by asking you, how did you get into crypto?
It was I was one of those I guess Top Shot was my gateway drug. I mean, I dabbled with it back in 2017, but paper handed some Ethereum from like 100. Um, and then got back in it early 2021 with Top Shot. Always been a big basketball fan, had a big daily fantasy sports background, like collectibles. So got in and it was easy money early on. Just the whole flipping of it, everything was blowing up. And then got a little bored just because it wasn't tangible enough for me. I couldn't do anything with it really. And that's when I heard about Zed in late March, early April, and transitioned over. Just so happened to be kind of timing the top a little bit on Top Shot, so that was nice too. But that was kind of my transition into crypto, into NFTs, and then over to Zed.
Gotcha. And then, so I've heard you guys say that you used Arbitrage as your daily fantasy sports name, but what does arbitrage mean in finance? Like, what is the meaning of that?
It's all about like finding inefficiencies in the market and kind of capitalizing it to guarantee profit. So I mean, it's a pretty well-known finance term, and we used it in there. I mean, in daily fantasy because we play on multiple sites, and you could kind of get these pricing inefficiencies. Say I love I don't know, LeBron on one site because he was $2,000 cheaper. We could play him there, and then hedge against him on the other site where it was a little bit less efficient to play him. That was the idea. And then honestly, I mean, we never knew this was going to blow up like this. We just knew we were going to apply some similar principles to this game. We had to pick a stable name. We were like, let's just call it Arbitrage Racing because we were Arbitrage DFS, and just kind of stuck.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. So, what's your initial investment when you find Zed Run? How much money did you put in at first?
We put in, it was, I think, 2.8 Ethereum for both of us, so 5.6. Um, and to go back a little more, that started with $14 into Top Shot, and like bought, I think it was the first Cool Cats pack
Hmm.
with the $14, and it just started flipping. I think I flipped Trey Young, or it was one of the Series 2 Trey Youngs, and then I think it's Tobias Harris Cool Cat for like 300 combined. And then I have a little bit of background in the flipping space, playing a bunch of like Madden Ultimate Team growing up. So I love the idea of like working the market, finding these people who don't know the value, sniping it, and then flipping. So yeah, I think my name was Johnny Utah over there. So did a lot of flipping on that, worked it up to 2.8 ETH, I think, which was like, I don't know, it was like 10 grand or so, and then cashed it out and put it into Zed and started it with Robbie, who also had 2.8 or so. I think he just matched me so he could get 50%. So 5.6 to answer your question.
What were the name of the first horses that you bought, and how long did you hold them and then flip them?
Man, the first horse we bought I, the first one we had like that was memorable, or do you want like just the first donkey we bought? I don't even know if I know the name. I try to learn from it, but then like just cut down on my memory because it was awful. And I paid like half an Ethereum just for one that could barely stand up.
Mm. So let's just say, like, what horse did you buy with that initial investment, and do you have the majority of those today?
So I actually started out joining with some friends from I played baseball with growing up, who actually run unethical racing now, but
Mm.
they were from my hometown. We started a stable that was just breeding mostly. And then so we invested in like some Z2s that were legendaries at the time, just because that seemed like a great pipeline for breeding. And we dabbled with racing. We had a racer named, I think it was a white racer, who was like a cross, but it just dominated these distances um, early on. And at that point, we were so just like crypto illiterate where we couldn't even figure out how to share a MetaMask login to where like only one of the guys could race, and I wasn't that guy. So they were more focused on breeding at that time too. And it was right around when breeding shut down that first time. I think when Roid Rager kind of broke it. So I ended up phasing out because I didn't have access to race. I wanted to race, and there was no breeding to be done. So kind of just agreed to start a racing stable of my own. Got Robbie in, and we invested that 5.6, and we bought. Man, most of mine went into that initial stable, honestly, and we did some flips with the Z2s and going from there. And then our first big purchase as Arbitrage was probably Sleight of Hand. That was our first like true grinder. I think we got for around 1 ETH, which was a lot for like a Z20, but we saw some promise from that. And then we must have run that horse 1,000 times in a month, and just every single $2, $5 race, we were in it, and it would always pull like 7 odds. And it had that nice natural U. So it would just stick in C4, C5 all day and just profit. I think we made like over an Ethereum in a month just grinding $2 races. Yeah.
And there was
that was
no
before
limit.
fatigue, obviously.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
There's no. So what was the state of Zed like at that time? What did it look like? Could you just race all day?
Race all day. You get 3 at a time. The queues for a while, when there were new horses still kind of coming through after they shut the breeding down, it was a little more fluid in terms of the horses you'd see. But about a month in, all the donkeys kind of realized they couldn't run, and you would see the same horses over and over again. I mean, I still have nightmares of gun for hire popping into my races. That was kind of one of the first kings of the spook chain. And Slide wasn't necessarily in there, but thinking back to my time with like White Racer, that thing would just spike up like 15 odds anytime gun for hire would hop in. And I think Murphy's Law had gun at that time, and he was kind of the same way, just running it like crazy. So it was hard to avoid, but yeah, that was my crash course into the spook chain. We actually thought the horse was broken there for a little bit. We like, I think, reached out to Jay or somebody, and we're like, yeah, this seems like a glitch. Did our horse get nerfed? Because it gets 6 in all these, and it's the exact same field except for this one horse, and it goes up to like 20 odds. Like, what's happening here? So that was an interesting time. A lot of learning, definitely, but we caught on fairly quick.
And then so you guys acquired LBJ Goat, right? And was that like the horse that put you on the map in Zed Run?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, definitely in terms of like being one of the big boys at the table, I guess that was the one. And I'll be the first to admit, like, we've had some very savvy purchases in our time at Zed, but LBJ was just some dumb luck. Like we found them. I guess we kind of set ourselves up because we identified it as one of potential kings of the spook chain because it had like a 3.0 Griffey. It finished last in that Griffey, so at 2,600. So we were like flagging it because of that. But you never know if those are going to be like the kings of the chain or just happen to be on the chain in a weak field. Like I think a pacer won LBJ's Griffin. So just like the field was not that good, and he pulled great odds for it, but she just happened to be one of the best. And in the nature of that game at that time, when you could just run, literally there were days we ran her close to 100 times, and it would keep her out of C1 because you could do free races too, which would pop, I think, every 30 minutes for class 1. And I would literally set an alarm like every 30 minutes, and you could tell when it was about to pop because the other one finished. I'd set an alarm, and if it was 1,000 to a 1,200, I'd try to beat all the other people and get her in there. So we would do that alongside running every single high dollar and even like just $10 and up C3 or C2. And it was awesome. I think we made like, we could probably get the data if we wanted, but it was multiple Ethereum in a month from just running LBJ.
Was LBJ Goat the horse that kind of taught you the system that you know now with downclassing and running your horses efficiently? Like, was that your testing horse to help figure it out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we initially got it. I think it was like June 1st. I still remember the day. Like June 1st is when we bought, when the bid was accepted. And from there, we kind of took it by storm, pulling amazing odds in all these fields. And I think there was one field where it beat Valkyrie, who was kind of the C2, C3 beast at that time. And at that point, we were like, wow, this is a great horse. So then we just kind of sent it on the way up. During that time, you didn't have to wait to get to class 1 before you could race in class 1. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, one of my favorite times in like Zed Discord was that day when everybody just kind of called on to LBJ being out there. Kind of a fun, like polarizing name. And there were just like people following along. Some people saying he's like a fraud, some saying she's awesome. And then I threw her into a class 1 with like Rendezvous and all of those beasts. And I think she did fine. She pulled like 4th best odds, but that was the point where I was like, okay, she's awesome and dominates, but she's not the king or the queen, whatever. And decided to reel her back in. So you can look at the race log. We kind of sent it And then we went back and tested a 1600, which is where all those specialists will tend to like A shape over the middle and pull really high odds if they're a true specialist. And once she did that and pulled really high odds, we knew she was in that chain at the time and wanted to reel her back in. So at that point, actually reached out to Murphy's Law, who was probably like one of the true OGs of tanking with Gun for Hire, because that horse had no business being in class 4, but he knew what he was doing. I think Valkyrie was doing some similar stuff. So reached out. It was all very intuitive to me. He just helped refine some of it. So shout out to Stins on that. But that was definitely the horse that we refined it with. And then we kind of brought it mainstream, I guess, because people were doing it ahead of us, but it wasn't that public. And then by doing it and by profiting so much with LBJ, I think it kind of brought it to the forefront. And I still remember early on, we debated it because it was going to kill the win percentage. Like LBJ could have easily been a 20 to 25% winner in the right C1s if we wanted to do that. But we wanted to maximize profitability and maximize ROI. So it made a lot of sense at the time. But people would like tag us and act like we were like ruining the horse and ruining like their resume, and we were fools. We're never going to be able to sell the horse for anything. I guess we can touch on that later. But there was some hot takes coming out, mainly because people just didn't quite understand it. So personally, I loved hearing that because that meant we were enough ahead of the like general population that there was still an edge to be had in this department. And then after it went mainstream, around the time I did that interview on Zed Insights, everybody seemed to be tanking, and now it's just kind of common practice in the meta, if you will.
How much profit did you make with LBJ Goat while you had him, and then how much did you sell her for?
Yeah, I'll pull it up. I want to get the number right. I don't know if we ever hit 10. I think we got to like 9.2 or something. Crazy. running LBJ over the course of like 4 months. And then we bought for 1.5 just as a one race Z3, and then sold for to WAGMI for basically the value of like 15. So it was some ETH, some horse equity. But yeah, so a decent little 4-month flip.
And you had LBJ Goat posted at 15 when I first came into the game, right? Kind of just as like, fuck it, if you want to buy it for that price, then go buy it.
Yeah. Yep. The problem I find this problem a lot when I'm selling horses, and like why I don't sell horses that often is I price it as if like the value of it to me and to our stable running it, because I don't want to let it go for cheap because I know we can make X amount a month like just running it, right? And then that's assuming someone is willing to dedicate the amount of time that we put in to run it optimally and truly get the maximum value out of it. So often there's a disconnect between what we value it at and what people are willing to pay. And that's perfectly fine, but that's a lot of reason why we end up just holding a lot of our horses.
Makes sense. So you perfected the racing system with LBJ Goat, and at this point, you still have LBJ Goat, but how did you go about scouting out these new horses, the Princess of Power, the Milk Bar Manias? How are you scouting these horses and finding them so early?
It was so much easier with odds, and part of the reason why I will debate anybody who says that odds should come back. I could see it in some element. I don't think odds are the answer because the game was just too easy at that point with odds. Once again, I think we were a little ahead of the curve on that portion of it. If you give the current state of Zed a month with odds, they will know exactly what we knew at that time. And they were way too easy, way too telling, and it would just kill any like longevity of the game. So I think they made the right move. On a side note, getting rid of that. Maybe you could give a little more information with the flames, but that's a different conversation. In terms of like scouting, we call it horses. With odds, it was quite easy. We had certain horses that we knew how good they were running, and we had them in every single class at most distances too. So if you're following it as much as we were, like we were on the game all day, at least one of us just tracking, seeing almost every race. You had that old site Zest that would pop up with every single odds. So we would track quite literally every race that came through that site to see if there was a new name that popped up. And once you see great odds, you want to see what the field is like, right? So typically we get one on our radar by seeing the odds, seeing the super low thing that would catch our eye, and then we would try to snipe the next race of that racer with one of our own, because they gave you 3 races at a time back then, and you had unlimited stamina. So we would literally just see what class they were in, see what distances they were running, and try to snipe one so we could get that kind of transitive property comparing our odds to the new horse's odds. At that point, hopefully it was early enough, we would know pretty close to how exactly good that horse was going to be. And eventually people started to catch on to a little bit on that. Like, oh man, we beat LBJ at 2,400. That horse is awesome. So we must have a killer. Or like, it really didn't get beat back then, but it would get close. And they'd be like, oh, I pulled 9s against LBJ. This is a killer. So what we did for Princess of Power was take it another level where we had a feeling Princess would at least be competitive with LBJ at distance. But at that time, the owner didn't really know if it was a distance horse or a sprinter. So I think it had joined at 1,200. And what people didn't know at the time was whatever position you were on, like the distance, the marathon ladder, you would also fall in that same order in the odds of the opposite end of the spectrum. So it was a 1,200. Princess of Power, I think, outpulled LBJ like 9-13. And as soon as we saw Princess beat LBJ by that much at a non-primary distance, we knew it was going to be better than LBJ. But we didn't tip our hand because that owner didn't see LBJ in a 2,400 and Princess beat it. So we still paid a pretty penny because they were fairly sharp. They knew what they had, just not quite what they had. So I think we paid 3 for Princess, and I've since made like 12.5 offer.
Is that the best situation when you get a guy that doesn't know what they have? Like a new guy, say for me, for instance, you kind of tipped me off because I saw your wallet address and I knew you were the best racer in the game. I'm sure you probably changed up your strategy now.
Yo.
But yeah, like, go ahead.
No, that's a great story. I mean, the ideal scenario is, yeah, somebody doesn't really know what they have. The true ideal scenario is somebody doesn't know what they have and they have just a buy now out there because they want to cash out and they love the idea of getting a quick like $1,000. That's the dream, and you just go snipe the buy now, because it does feel a little wrong, like taking advantage of somebody who doesn't know what they're doing and bidding and then them just accepting. It feels a little different than them setting a price they love and you just beating other people sniping it. Probably is the same thing. It just feels better, make me sleep at night. But we don't really have many of those like super snipes, I'll call it. It was more so finding them early, taking an educated risk, and then paying a price to reflect the amount of risk we're willing to take on, and then just surviving long enough to hit those upside scenarios like Princess of Power, like Milk Bar. So it's kind of just setting ourselves up to get lucky. But I mean, you could quote it as well as I with that Diamonds exchange, where I don't remember what tipped me off with Diamonds, but you could just tell it was a killer. It was a Z2, and I don't ever think I really like lowballed you. I almost came on too hot, if anything. I think it was like 5, and then I got all the way up to like 10. And this was the time there was not many sales going for that high. And it was early too. You were probably single digits or low teens races in. And I mean, God, props to you for just, I don't know. I mean, thinking psychologically of like, man, he must know what he's got. But people who get mad at us for having burners now, you can thank Evergreen for that, man. He is the reason, because I have no doubts if we had kind of changed our strategy and he may not have known it was us, maybe he didn't have that same conviction to hold on, knowing that we knew something about Diamonds.
Yeah, it was because I came in, I bought the horse for 1.1, and I come back the next day and I see a 3 Ethereum offer. Now I'm sitting here like, okay, I could take this quick flip, but somebody knows something about this damn horse that I don't. And then the one thing that tipped me off is that I researched the game, and then I go into the wallet. Now at this point, I'm new to NFTs. This is my first NFT. And so I'm like, I think I'm doing some real detective shit by going and looking in your wallet. And then I see all these killer horses. I'm like, this guy knows something about my horse that I don't know. And then I went back and looked at the races and saw like you tossed in Princess of Power or LBJ Goat or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was like 2,000 meters. Diamonds had like pulled comparable odds to Princess. And while that's not her best distance, that like doesn't happen very often. I mean, Breathless Edge didn't pull the same odds as Princess of Power at 2,000, and Diamonds was doing that. So I knew something was there, even though it was super early. Like, that's not fluky at all.
No. Would you have entered Diamonds in the if you had him, would you have thrown him in that 1,000-meter Netflix race?
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's the horse where like the win equity is just so strong. If it was a normal, like no rake but no juice, that high of stakes, I don't think I would have done it. But it's so positive EV for that horse with that win equity to run there. Like you may look stupid 80% of the time,
Right.
but the 20% of the time you're going to be just paying for those other 4 out of 5, and more. So it's absolutely the right choice. As long as you have the funds, like don't bankrupt yourself doing it because you're gonna hit some cold streaks as you know. But I think you came in second in the other one, right? Or the third?
Third, yeah, and the second one I got third. First one I got 12th.
There you go. That's the name right there. But I mean, yeah, so well worth it with the juice pots.
So let's go
Plus the
into.
glory and like the rush, man. It's so good.
Tell me about that, because you were in. Were you in the first one with Milk Bar?
Yeah, I got both. I mean, Nopa actually flamed in both too, but I think came in like fifth and like sixth. So just duds of runs.
Is that like the most like heart racing type of race right there for you in the whole platform?
No, I tell you the best, like most nervous or like excited I've been on the platform. It's been 2 times, and they're very very different, but both are with Princess of Power. One was I got Princess of Power actually on my birthday, and just like sent it in the middle of the night in a 2600 class 1 against Rendezvous, and that was the one I think it's going to be good, but is it going to be like the next goat? That was the race, and it's just like the rush you get waiting for the race to pop and those odds to come in. It wasn't even the race, it was like seeing the odds and waiting for them to come up, because it's just so like definite when you see it like that. And going through it the first time where Rendezvous kind of like stepped on LBJ a little bit, and then Princess pulling like 1.5 better odds than Rendezvous at one of its best distances. That was probably the most excited or anxious I've been. And the other was that first Zed tournament where she made the grand final, and just like all the hype of it being like the first official tournament. That whole format is so good. And then that 1400 where she had a kind of an inverse roll, but it was a good run, but she shouldn't have been having a good run. And she lost by like 0.02 or like 0.002 seconds and came in second. And that's what cost her the tournament. But I'm not bitter. But that was like such a rush of like, man, if I get this, we're so far ahead of the game, like in terms of what's coming next with distances she's actually good at. That whole sequence was just so fun. And like, I love the grand final format. It's just hard to get to.
Is Princess of Power a U shape?
More U-shaped than like an LBJ super specialist. And once again, going back to like that 1600 piece, like Princess pulls like 9 odds at 16. It's not a good distance for her, but she's perfectly fine. So she has a little bit of a natural U, but it's more just like a complete L shape, whereas LBJ is just like hammering the left side of that L and doesn't really ever get 9, 10, 11, 12s at distance. Princess kind of completes the L. So not a full natural U, but a little more variance. And that's part of the reason why she can run in any field. And I think the longevity of that type of horse, because they have more upside as a result of having a little more variance, a little more downside, means that they're going to be sustainable for a longer time. That's why Diamond's what you have. That horse is going to be relevant for, I mean, another 150,000 horses. Like it's going to be maybe not quite as good, but it has runs where its A+ run is not going to get beat by anybody. That's part of the reason why I went and bought Festus, which is a newer horse. A lot of people don't know about it, but if you look at that horse, that is a more natural U type where you can run it anywhere 1600 and above, and it's going to win 18 to 20% in any field, but it can make you look like an idiot and lose by 5 seconds at the same way. But it has these runs. Like it had a run this morning where it won a class 1 paid race by 4 seconds. Like second place was 4 seconds behind, not even on the screen. So that's the upside, and that's where you can just tell it's going to be relevant for a long time. And I think those are great horses to buy.
I love those horses because like you don't necessarily have to wait for a tournament to make money off of those horses. You can just run them day to day. You know, like, okay, maybe I've got a bunch of 12s in my $2 races. Maybe I can go up to like a $10 race now and hopefully get that first place roll, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You just got to time it right. So I don't know, I'm in the camp where I think all the races are independent, but it definitely feels sometimes like you're due and then it kind of comes. So I need to learn how to stagger my entry fees a little better, because right now I just do pretty much a standard $5-10 every time.
Interesting that you say that, because I thought that you would have this figured out, if anybody, but I guess nobody has this
I
part
think
figured out, right? Then it's just kind of random.
I think it's random. That's kind of how I figured it out. I mean, that's my belief right now. I'm open to ideas. Maybe BG's cooking something up
Mm.
with streakiness, but I think they're all independent roles. So I just try to keep it consistent. But I mean, with the current system, it's almost impossible to keep things perfectly consistent because if you see a distance pop, I'm not gonna like skip $100 2200 that I know that horse is gonna kill at just because it's been winning a ton recently. Like
Mm.
I'm still gonna enter it. So it's hard to really like stick to that strategy, even though it sounds good in theory.
Yeah, the
But
usual.
maybe they throw out something later on where it's more like a DraftKings style entry
Mm.
where you have a distance, you have an entry fee, and once it fills, you got another one popping up. I think that would work really well in terms of satisfying the demand not only for like each distance but also for each buy-in pool. Because you'll see sometimes like yesterday, Class 3 had marathons as all the high dollar races, and nobody's entering just because all the specialists are classed up and none of them are running in C3. But they just sit there and take up the higher volume buy-ins all day, and that's not the way to do it. There's got to be a better way.
Would you say this game has changed your life?
I'd say it's well on the way. Like I mean, definitely, I would say yes, just because I never would have thought people would want to hear what I'm talking about and being like on the I don't know, Mount Rushmore of Zed stables right now. So it's kind of cool being like a virtual celebrity of sorts. Never really would have thought that would have been my path or like doing streams like this. I from a data background doing analytics, 9 to 5 job, and I'm still doing that actually on my lunch break right now. So I wouldn't say it's fully changed my life yet, but I think it's well on the way.
And what do your friends and family think about? Like, I mean, at first it probably had to be like, oh, okay, he's racing horses. But once you start to get into these numbers, it probably gets real, right?
Real. Yeah, I'll tell you what, I prepped them well with Top Shot because I came in there and they were like, what the hell is this? Like, it's a picture of a car, like a moment that is a little video clip I can watch on YouTube. So going from that, and I kind of got the shock factor out of the way. And then going from that into something at least you can race like a video game and make some money like daily fantasy sports. They were actually pretty prepped for that and pretty receptive early on. And then, yeah, once you start seeing the dividends and kind of how we're doing things and I'll explain to them all the analytics I do and stuff. I think they are on board. They're still skeptical of the longevity of it, which is probably healthy. Keeps me sane a little bit,
Mm.
but they're very supportive and thankfully because it takes a ton of time.
So let's go into longevity. You're making you and Diamond Hands. Well, you yourself, you've always been making some big purchases, and now you've teamed up with Diamond Hands. Where do you guys see this game? Everybody's making big moves. We got guys like Wag Me now. We got guys like you taking this game more serious. What's the longevity of Zed? Where do you want to see this game go?
I want to see. I mean, I think tournaments are the future. I think tournaments and custom races are 100% where this thing is going, where it's going to prosper the most. You get tournaments or even one-off races like they're sponsored and juiced up. You need things to stimulate the top end racing economy, which I think you're seeing now with these high dollar races and people going for these truly game changing horses that can win that 10 grand in one day, like Terms did last week, or I think Polarity won this most recent one.
Mm-hmm.
So that like big lotto ticket piece brings a lot of interest to the top end. And then by throwing in these A-shape tournaments where if they do it right, I don't think this one's going to be done because they don't have the functionality, but where you have the A shape and then you actually reward the A shape in the bracket piece as well, unlike last 2 weeks ago where they did the top 3 still advances. If you keep the format consistent the whole way, in theory, you're actually going to be rewarding these A-shape horses, which honestly excites me a lot too, because I can go buy an A-shape horse and have fun in that tournament as well. I would argue that has even more of like a market inefficiency piece where you could just find the best A-shaped horse who's priced like a donkey right now and go pick it up and go win 5 grand in a A-shaped tournament once they announce it. So like it's those little inefficiencies that really intrigue me, just trying to be ahead of the curve and go with that. So I think they have a ways to go in terms of refining these tournaments and growing it, but I think they're on the path. I mean, everybody always says it, but we're still early. Like any new game that comes out is going to have these exact same like speed bumps. And I think it's kind of going back to like football where everybody loves the backup quarterback until they replace the starting quarterback and you see it's the same issues. I think it's very much the same way with all this racing like competition. So I think Zed, the one thing they really need to get their act together on is communication, though. Like, there's no excuse for some of the pieces where they just keep us in the dark. I don't want to get too much into that, but I think the game is heading in the right direction, and they're doing things behind the scenes. I think their communication, for the most part, is just trash or very disconnected from what they're doing and what they're telling us. So if they improve on that, I think the game is going great. I think a lot of my purchases would suggest I believe in that truly. And I think a lot of the other kind of big guns in the space are feeling the same way.
Does a guy like
And yeah, the other thing to touch on.
Go ahead.
What's up?
Go ahead.
I was saying, to touch on your other part of the question with custom races, I think that's the other way you kind of design it to make sure every horse has a place. So it could either be, I mean, once again, tying it back to DraftKings, right? They have custom lobbies. You can create your own exact criteria. And if you get enough people into that contest, the race runs. So you can say, all right, I want to do a Buterin only race at 2,200 where it has to be a bred Buterin. And I enter it. And then if 11 other people want to enter, we run it. And at least I know at that point, like, I'm avoiding all these other beasts. And you can make the criteria whatever you want. There's really no reason why, as long as there's enough demand. Or you could just have one that's like a private contest, and it's you and 11 of your buddies who are playing with the no rake. And it's just, I mean, a great Friday night, you know? So that opens up a whole new avenue for every single horse having a place to be. So if they pair that, the high-end tournaments and tournaments for everybody, as well as like custom races, I think the ecosystem will be super healthy.
Yeah, because, like, you don't have to come in and buy a horse to compete against you, right? You can just buy a horse to compete against your 12 buddies at the bar, right? And it makes it fun.
Exactly. It's so fun. And then, like, it's unrealistic to think, and I don't want to offend anybody, but, like, it's unrealistic to think week in and week out the most amount of money should go to, like, the lottery ticket horses, right? If you're spending 10 ETH, 20 ETH like WAGMI is on horses, it makes sense for those assets to be the most valuable, and most of the tournaments and big pools to be geared towards those types of horses. Otherwise, your economy collapses because nobody's going to pay that much for that horse. So I think it's important to remember that. But hopefully Zed does a good job, and it seems like they're trying to balance satisfying the premium horses with these A-shaped horses. So far, so good on that. I've been impressed. As long as they figure out what to do with the quarterfinal, semifinal, and final with these A-shapes, because you should not be rewarding first, second, and third in those races.
Without giving away your secrets, are you trying to game that right now to get into that tournament?
We'll see. It's hard now. If I had LBJ, I absolutely would be trying to get into the A shape, because you have that. Yeah. Yep. So that's an option, but we'll see. Stay tuned. Maybe on Wednesday, or I guess Tuesday of next week, you'll see some names popping up. But in reality, it's pretty hard to game. Like, you can't do it with a sprinter because they're going to be bucketed in that mid block, and a sprinter is never going to win an 1,800 quarterfinal, semifinal, and a final. So you're kind of just wasting your time, killing your win rate. So it's not as easy as to game as just like, hey, run a spike horse at 1,600. It's not quite that clean, but we have some ideas.
Does a guy like WAGMI coming into this game give you even more justification and belief in this game?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the one thing we're kind of missing with the game right now is just people truly, like, aping in, like those OG crypto people who have all this Ethereum. And I think they're really the first of that bunch, or at least early in that fact that they have all this crypto money, but they want to do something with it that is entertaining. And it's a game, but I mean, at the same time, you can kind of buy your way in, and every horse has a price. And they're certainly doing that, but they're also super interested in learning about the game. Like, I talk with them pretty frequently, trying to give them some racing tips. I know Donkey teaches them a little bit about breeding and things like that. So they're not just dropping money in, they're, like, engaged in the community. So they're much more than like a stimulus package. And I mean, if it works for them, I think that's just proof of concept that they're not going to be the last that comes in.
So let's go into Arbitrage hands. I see this one wallet. Now, this is before you guys announced it, and I see someone's buying Festus, Ray Del Mundo, and Evergreen Gates. And I'm sitting back, I'm like, this is either KYH or it's Arbitrage. And I didn't know, but then when you guys announced it was you and Donkey Teeth, how'd you guys form this? Why? And just what's the story behind that?
Yeah, I mean, it's more like in my eyes, you have, like, the blood tool is big for breeding, but in terms of like a single best breeder of monsters, Donkey Teeth like is that stable for me. So I think as a partnership, it makes a lot of sense to kind of have the avenue of me being one of the best racers and then him being one of the best breeders. It just makes sense for a lot of dialogue, right? So we've been talking a lot, thinking about future breeding plans, getting some tips on both ends for us, and just learning more about the game. So that was kind of how it started. And then it actually came out to where we had Festus targeted, and Donkey Teeth came to me wanting the exact same horse. And at that point, it was like, well, why don't we just, I'm a little short on liquidity because we hadn't sold Milk Bar yet. Why don't we just go 50-50 on it, right? And then we started going a little deeper, got Festus, and then went through targets. And we had some very similar targets as well. And I was like, well, still short on liquidity. Let's go 50-50 on this horse and on this horse. So we kind of started with that. I also adopted a few of his earlier horses that he gave to me for, I guess, half of them. So there's, I think, 9 or 10 horses in that stable. So the plan would be, as he breeds monsters, if I identify him early, potentially we could do like a 50-50 split, and I'll do some race management on those. So at least that's the dream for me. Let me get like a triumph in there, like a Shadow for Days in there, and that'd be a good time. So that's my logic on it. He's just a great guy to work with. So I would point out it's definitely a joint venture in addition to Arbitrage. There's no way like us merging our entire stables. It's more of just a partnership and potentially like a go forward of future horses, but he will not be acquiring Arbitrage.
What does the future of Arbitrage and Arbitrage hands look like? I've heard people say that some of these stables, like your stable, could potentially become a DAO. What's the future looking like for you guys?
We're always open to ideas. I mean, I think whatever we see as kind of the best growth opportunity, we're going to assess. That's where you start talking about like it changing your life. Doing something like that absolutely would. Where you start thinking about like, do I need to do this full time? Because right now we have 2 of us and we can pretty much manage it with both of our workloads and do it optimally. But if you double the horses or you have all this outside investing, then it becomes a little more real. So I won't rule anything out. I think the DAO piece is interesting. You see some of that happening. So I could be like a race manager type or acquired by a DAO would be interesting. For us, I mean, we're kind of just trying to adjust to the game as it comes and then let that stuff come to us a little bit. We're not too proactive with it yet, but I will say recently with the liquidity piece and seeing all these great buying opportunities in the market, it would be a great time to have some liquidity. And that's something potentially one of those types of setups could provide, because I mean, you've seen it. There's all sorts of horses to be bought at pretty fair prices. I think it's a market inefficiency with how much you can make with a horse in these tournaments with a good roll if they keep doing them weekly, that versus what they're actually priced at. So I'd be intrigued if the numbers matched up, but nothing's set in stone right now.
If you were just coming into the game today and you understood the game, you did your research, how much Ethereum would you spend and what would you go get?
Oh man, coming in right now.
Yeah, I normally ask people like with half an ETH what you would get, but I want to hear what you say.
Yeah.
I want to see if like you would need more or less.
I would think of it like kind of as your, I don't know how many people have like a day trading background, but you would definitely want to ease into it. Like with day trading, you do some paper trading to start, so you don't like lose your back at doing like losing everything. So you do paper trading, get your hang of it, make your mistakes where it doesn't actually hurt you. So I would start out buying probably like a 0.3 horse. I mean, it's a lot of money, but $1,000, lower $1,000. Buy a horse that can grind and can teach you a little bit about how to maneuver your way through a class system, how to identify where they're good, where they're not, learn all those lessons with a small investment. Definitely on the racing side. I mean, you're talking to us. So I would go get a racer and learn. And then if you get a good one, maybe you grind out half an Ethereum, maybe you make a run in a tournament. And then you can either choose to put more money in or just reinvest that piece and go for like I think the Genesis are just way underpriced right now. There's something coming where they're going to add value to that Genesis. Eventually Des, you would imagine, comes, and they've already stated that's going to be targeted at Genesis holders. And you look at some of the prices now and they're well below drop price for most of the Z's. So I think that's a great buy. So I'd probably have my racer, then invest, go get a Z5 Finney for 0.6. Those are some of my favorite Genesis horses just because they're affordably priced. They've been proven to be really good runners, really good breeders. I had file format for a long time. One of the top 10% C1 runners and can breed too. I think one of its offspring was a finalist yesterday in the tournament. So I love the Z5 Finneys. So that'd be my strategy. Get a nice cheap racer, learn that side of it, then invest in a Genesis.
How do you identify these racers? What website are you going on, and what metrics are you looking at? How many races, flame percentage? What are you looking at there?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be a lot easier, like I was saying with odds. I use Know Your Horses almost exclusively. We have some of our own internal stuff when it comes to like scouting, but it's all pulling data from these public sites like Haku and Know Your Horses. So that's more for just filtering it the way we want to filter it. So that's for scouting. In terms of like race analytics, it's almost entirely KYH. They have things very intuitively laid out, I think, with the newish horseshoe function where you can pretty cleanly see where horses are good, where they're not so good. And then Flames, in some aspect, made it even easier to find where your horse should be run at. So I think it's actually easier that way to figure out where to run your horse, looking at flame rates, adjusting for field and buy-in. But all else equal, Flames do mean you're running it in the right place. But it makes it harder to evaluate exactly like where a horse stacks up next to other horses. Using like Diamonds for an example, right? That horse is a beast, and I have zero doubt if we had odds, it would be top 3 odds in pretty much every race it enters at any distance. But I don't know what the flame rate is. I would be surprised in C1 if it's much above like 60%. I don't know. Just because it has that natural U, and the definition of Flames is podium rate. So it could have 20% win equity and 10% second and 0% third. And that 30% podium rate isn't in the top 3 of the field because you have these more A-shaped, low Z Genesis horses that are very left skewed and consistent, but they have a 5% win rate and a 20% second, 20% third. And they're going to flame over you all day, but you're the better horse. And that's a little tricky, and you need to learn how to identify these horses that are impacted negatively by flames and which horses to put more stock into the flames.
So that's just if a horse is winning without pulling flames, or if it's getting like 1st and 12th without getting flames, or it's like 50-50.
If it's a U, if it's a natural U, and you want to make sure you're controlling by distance, right? So if you look at your distance, and it's your best one, and it's a natural U, like we actually just got a new horse, Skux. So SKUXX is one of the biggest natural U distance specialists I've ever seen. So it never flames in class 1. But once again, I guarantee if we ran a lot in class 1, it would be a 15% winner there. But it will flame less than 15% of the time. So like a rare case where you have a higher win rate than a flame rate. But it's because it's tanking itself so much naturally with a huge variance. But that variance also enables it to win those tough fields because it's got that top end ability.
Yeah, I love that. Chat, if you guys got any questions for Arbitrage, we got about like 5 more minutes here. I'll ask you my last question. If you could change one thing in Zed right now, you can bring back odds, take away flames, bring back 3 races at a time, take away fatigue. What would you change and why?
I would add customs, 100%. Custom races is the thing missing right now. And I think that's why a lot of people feel left out with some of their horses because there's just no place to run them. Freeze used to be a good spot, and they still are. Like, it's no cost and it's fun, but the way they have freeze set up right now, and I think they're about to change this, where you can class up, but you can't class down. Free races feel like a trap because all you're going to do is just direct your horse up to class 1 and it'll be left there to die. So I think if you had customs, you would be able to kind of run that horse however you wanted against whoever you want and just have fun with the game again, right? Like you could create your own free race. You could create your own 50 cents race. You just want the entertainment. So I think that would be huge, and that's be the next thing I would add.
I love that. Yeah, it's just taking the serious competitive aspect out of the game. For the guy that just wants to come in, have a good time on Friday night with his buddies, he can do that. Andy Mack asks,
choose your own adventure.
Yep. How do you test out a new breed?
So I typically pick a Griffin that is on one end of the spectrum, so either like 1,000 or 1,200, and then a 24, 26. just so I can know, like, hey, if it flames if it flames at 2,600, it's probably not a sprinter. So I can go ahead and like knock off 3 of the distances as it being a possibility. And if it flames at 2,600, it's either a good distance specialist, or it's a mid that's a low Z, and then I can kind of just narrow it down that way. I think if you run like an 1,800, you may flame and it's good, but that doesn't tell me really anything whether it's a sprinter or a distance horse, and I'm just kind of left to figure all that out in the paid racing or in the class racing. So I try to dial it in as quick as I possibly can. I think one way to do that is starting on the end of the spectrum and then kind of working your way to the other end as you try to discover the horse.
Are you profitable in this game? I know the answer to this question, but how profitable are you in this game?
We're doing all right. I'd say everybody knows our. I guess if you look, you can find our on the track profits. I would say we've made even more flipping horses than on the track. That's what people don't realize. We don't hit every time. I'd say there's probably a 50% hit rate, but our misses are managed well, and we get a price that we feel okay about the downside, and we play for the home run.
I like that. And last question for you. I've heard someone say that everybody talks about your wins, nobody talks about your misses. What are some of the horses that you missed on, and how much did you spend on them?
Man, we got one right now. It was his name, Bullish Luck was one we have right now, and I think we used some speed data there, and it had good signs of a U. It had like a really like historically good 1,800 time. So I'm still on the fence of whether speed really matters, but I do believe it's a great sign of the shape and consistency of a horse. And this horse showed really good signs of having a significant U. So by running a time that fast, it was comparable with like a Vanilla Bean or a 9 Lives type U horse. And we wanted to pull the trigger, so I think we bought it for like 0.4 or 0.44, and we're still running it, but it's a class 4 horse. And that one we kind of got doubly hit because it's good enough to grind out class 4, and we could have made that 0.4 back or a decent chunk of it back in time. But we bought it like 2 days before they announced the nerfing of the U's with the class system. So it was like, this horse isn't as good as we think, and we're not going to be able to run it in class 4 like we want. So we just parked it right now, and we're kind of waiting for the class system to come back to it a little bit. And if somebody wants to pay 0.3 or 0.4 for it, we would cut losses. But we're not going to run it up into class 1 because that's a death sentence.
How much did you guys pay for Vanilla Bean?
I don't know if they want to tell us this, but
you can keep it on the low.
I would say keep it on low. I'll tell you because I know Wagme doesn't mind. We sold LBJ for said like 15, and then Milk Bar for 22. So not quite Artois money, but I think it was a fair buy for them based off the consistency. As long as it stops tanking in these $3,000 races, we made like 1.3, I think, in a month, and that was with just kind of throwing it in anything in class 1 and no huge tournament hits. So I think that's very sustainable. Plus, it's got that Z2 Genesis stability. So I think it was a solid buy, but yeah, not quite Artois level purchase.
Gotcha. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. Do you got any questions for me?
I'm good, man. I appreciate all you do. And then, yeah, I've definitely learned a thing or two from you watching Diamonds. So I look forward to trying to emulate what you're doing with Diamonds with our horse Festus. So I'm always learning, and yeah, appreciate what you're doing as well.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for what you've done for the community as well. You've put out a lot of information that you could have kept secret on these what we call synthetic U-shaped horses now. So I think a lot of people appreciate you, and just thanks for being a good dude, man.
Yeah, you got it, man.
Have a good day, bro.
See ya.